Hello. Welcome to the Rotten Horror Picture Show, the horror movie podcast, where we talk about films off the Rotten Tomatoes 200 Best Horror Movies of All Time list. My name is Clay, and with me, as always, is Amanda. How are you doing, Amanda?
For now, I'm good. I don't know if I have several days to stay alive after this.
Nope.
How many more?
I don't know.
5?
Two.
3? 2?
Wait.
6? 6 days now, right?
2 now. Right now.
Two now?
Yes.
Wow, that went fast.
It always does. We are talking today about 2002's The Ring, which I never thought about before, but when I was looking up stuff about this, someone mentioned that the title has two meanings, because it is the ring that they see in the well.
Yes.
But also the ring of the phone.
I am really glad that you are also only coming to this revelation now, because I also had that thought, and I was like, I am such a fucking idiot. The whole thing is about when a phone rings.
Yes. So I want to get into that.
Sure.
A little bit later.
Yeah, we should probably do the intro stuff.
Yes,
first.
We'll get to that. This is number 192 on our list. It has a 71% Rotten Tomatoes score with a 48% audience score, which I find very surprising because I was under the impression this was like a fan favorite.
Yeah, this is sort of like universally seen as a decent scary movie.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of inarguably single-handedly caused a genre boom, right? Because this was the first real Japanese horror transplant.
Yeah. The Grudge followed this, and then people started getting into some of the more the actually Japanese versions of movies.
They realized that people can read,
right?
And decided to just start putting out some of the Japanese ones.
Yep.
Interestingly enough, the director of Ringu directed Ring 2. I felt like Mike Myers doing that for some reason. And not good.
Oh,
not a great movie. So I've seen, but he also directed the sequel to Ringu, which is a completely different movie than Ring 2. So the more you know, I guess. Anyway, had you seen this movie before?
Oh yeah. This was a formative one for me.
I was gonna say, yeah. Yeah, you're a little bit younger than I am, so this was probably, you were like early teens when this came out?
I was like 14.
14?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of funny because I think you and I have talked about this kind of thing, and my husband and I have talked a couple times about this sort of thing, about sort of like your early or like formative movie memories, like movie going, or like you know, even movies you watched at home. But it's made me realize that I don't have many movie theater memories.
Sure. Yeah.
As like a child. Like I know we went to them occasionally.
It's funny because I don't really either. Like I have a couple from when I was very young.
Yeah.
And then Jurassic Park, and that's it. Basically, until I was in my teens.
Right. So I feel like I don't really have any strong like, yes, when I was, 9 years old and my parents took me to see The Lion King or whatever. Like I think they did take me to see The Lion King. I don't think I was 9. I think I was littler.
I think you're unlocking hidden memories for me, because I do also remember going to see The Lion King and Aladdin, so I definitely did.
Yeah, but I feel like this is a long roundabout way of saying this is sort of like a core memory for me, going to see The Ring in the theater. Yeah. Because it was PG-13 and I was 14.
Yes.
So I could go with my friend and no adults.
Is this the first movie you went without adults?
I want to say yes. Factually, that might not be true, but in my memory, in terms of like importance and having something have an effect on me, yeah. And I remember sitting there with another 14-year-old girl watching this movie about, like, it starts off with a couple teenage girls, one of them dying horrifically, and just being like, we have made a huge mistake. And then sitting through the whole movie, and by the end of it coming out, and my friend being pretty much like, I'm never going to sleep again, I'm traumatized forever, and me being like, that was the best thing that has ever happened to me in my life.
I had a similar experience. The first movie that I went to without an adult was Street Fighter.
Oh, wow.
And I also...
Formative moment for Clay.
I also came out saying this was a huge mistake.
This was a huge mistake. But yes, so I have seen this. I saw it in the theater. I've seen it a few times since then. Not I feel like I maybe rewatched it a couple years ago. I think maybe in the depths of COVID, early days.
Sure.
3 years ago at this point. Or maybe even a little bit before that.
I actually do have a very formative young childhood movie-going experience that is, I feel like you will be able to relate to this.
Oh, boy.
I don't like spiders.
Yep, neither do I.
Yes. And my mom, being an observant parent, knew this. But for some reason, she decided to take me to go see the movie Arachnophobia.
Oh, God, I knew that's what you were going to say. And was she mad at you?
It didn't go well.
What had you done, Clay?
She claims now that it was, she thought maybe it would help me kick my fear of spiders.
No,
but
Mom.
It did not.
No, that's not how that works.
To be fair, and this is, I'm these are stories that my mother always jokes. The only person you should tell this to is your therapist. But she also one day when my sister was homesick from school, said, you know what movie we should watch? My sister is a vegan. She wasn't at the time, but she's always been an animal lover.
I have a feeling I maybe know why she's vegan now. It's about what you're about to say.
She said, you know what we should watch? There's this movie that I love called Old Yeller.
No.
And she forgot how the movie ended.
No.
And I said to her, that's the only thing anybody remembers about that story is how the movie ends. So I believe I think it got to a point where she's like, well, that's the end of the movie. And she just shut it off.
Oh. And they had this nice old dog forever and ever. The end.
Yes. So.
Yes.
The Ring, however, I did. Did I see The Ring in the theater? I believe I did. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say yes because I don't know if I've seen it since then.
Wow.
I can't. I know years ago, one Halloween, we go to our varying house to do pumpkins and movies and stuff like that. I know we did Ringu one year, but I can't remember if we did like a back-to-back kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But either way, that's at least 10 years ago. Yeah. So it's been a while since this is one where it's like, I haven't seen it very many times, but I feel like its impact was large enough that I'm like, oh yeah, I know The Ring. I know what happens in that movie.
Yeah. I
can tell you everything that happens in the movie.
I was going to say, was that feeling true or was that just a story you were telling yourself?
That story, well, no, because I did not remember how this movie started at all. I think I mostly remembered the very end and the closet scene. Yep. And then the middle is like, oh yeah, then they do other stuff. I actually thought this was the one with Bill Pullman in it. I kept waiting for Bill Pullman to show up, but he's in The Grudge.
Got it. Isn't that one with Sarah Michelle Gellar?
Sure is. Not that I favor that or anything, but we're going to take a quick break and play you the trailer, and then we will be right back.
Have you heard about this videotape that kills you when you watch it? You start to play it, and it's like somebody's nightmare. And as soon as it's over, your phone rings. And what they say is, you will die in 7 days.
Katie told you she was gonna die?
She told me. She said she didn't have enough time.
Would you say that I'm gullible?
No.
Easily rattled?
You're a little highly strung, maybe.
I watched the tape.
I'm not gonna get all worked up over some rumor. Show it to me.
Miss Keller, I'm bothered by these drawings. Why did you draw that house?
She told me to.
Who? Who told you to?
She shows me things.
Before you die, you see the ring.
The images on the tape are leading us somewhere.
Did she show you the horses?
Don't you understand, Rachel?
Tell me, miss, what is it you think you know?
Hello?
Before you die, you see the ring. When you see the ring, everyone will suffer. You see the ring. You see the ring. You saw it.
Okay, The Ring from 2002, directed by Gore Verbinski, written by Ehren Kruger, based on the novel by Koji Suzuki, and a screenplay by Hiroshi Takahashi. And this one stars Naomi Watts, Martin Henderson, who he plays Noah.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't recognize him from anything. I looked him up. You know who he is? He's the porn producer from X.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, Maxine's boyfriend.
Wow.
Yeah, not in a million years.
Nope.
David Dorfman, Amber Tamlin, the voice of Lilo from Lilo and Stitch, Davy Chase, and Logan Roy, a.k.a. William Stryker, a.k.a. Agamemnon, a.k.a. Hannibal Lecter, the great Brian Cox. Brian Cox using his Hannibal Lecter vaguely not European accent. Yeah. I kept waiting for him to...
Somewhat menacing,
Yes.
somewhat charming.
I kept waiting for him to say, "Would you like to leave me your home phone number?" as he leaves. Amanda, what happens in The Ring?
It sounds like just another urban legend. A videotape filled with nightmarish images leads to a phone call foretelling the viewer's death in exactly 7 days. Newspaper reporter Rachel Keller is skeptical of the story until 4 teenagers all die mysteriously exactly 1 week after watching just such a tape. Allowing her investigative curiosity to get the better of her, Rachel tracks down the video and watches it. Now she has just 7 days to unravel the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
That summary was a little weird in fact that it didn't mention that one of those teenagers was her niece.
What?
The summary that I just read
Yeah.
did not mention that one of the teenagers who dies from watching
Oh,
the tape
right.
is
Amber
her...
Tamblyn is her niece,
Yes,
right?
it is her niece.
That's, honestly,
Did you not also not know
I
that?
don't think so. So one of the things about this movie that I said when we were watching it is at the time when I saw this, I had a severe case of attractive blonde lady
Also,
blindness.
what did you say? White Australian lady face blindness?
Face blindness. Because the only movie I had ever seen Nicole Kidman in up to that point was Batman Forever. And I had never seen Naomi Watts in a movie before. And for some reason, I thought Naomi Watts was Nicole Kidman for like half the movie. And then when she goes to her sister's house, where it's another blonde lady, I didn't know what was going on.
There are 2 Nicole Kidmans?
3 now.
Well, Clay, you will not find Nicole Kidman in this movie.
I know that now.
But some things you will find include Haley Faux Osment.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Good kid actor.
Yeah, he's one of the A+ creepy little kid actors of the late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, I kind of forgot about The Sixth Sense until our friend Pat made that joke.
Yes. Thanks, Pat.
Yeah. But I kept thinking, oh, this is like the horror movie version of the kid from Jerry Maguire.
Yeah.
But I guess that's sort of like
Or
the starting point of
Good
that.
Damien from The Omen.
Yeah, but like the 90s had this influx of like precocious kids who were
Yes.
like a little bit more well-spoken than they should be.
Yes.
Starting, I think, in
Yes.
Jerry Maguire. So
Who had a certain worldview or ability to see things,
right.
whether philosophically or literally.
Speaking truth from the mouths of child.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is another one. He's very good.
Yeah, he's excellent.
Yeah.
He's a very good child actor. You'll also find horse suicide.
Horse suicide, a first for us
Yeah.
in 76
Yes.
movies. Honestly, I don't know if I've ever seen another movie with a horse suicide in
I
it.
don't really think I need to.
Yeah, it was pretty disturbing.
It's pretty brutal, actually. Tina Belcher's bedroom.
Yes, the little place that they keep Samara. It has big Tina Belcher vibes, I think.
Yes, yeah. Little girl's bedroom.
She likes horses.
Full of horses. Pop-up face Hall of Fame inaugural class member Samara.
Yeah, so that's the thing about this movie. There's like 2 moments
Yes.
that I feel like are the things people remember from this movie and kind of not really anything else. And I don't really know if you need anything else, but they're very effective.
Yes. questionable parenting, but like benignly questionable parenting.
Yeah, I mean, I guess she leaves the tape around to the point that her son can watch it, but I mean, is that really her fault?
I mean, that's where the questionable part comes in.
Yeah.
Right? Because
I
if she
guess that is
didn't,
the question.
if she didn't, that would be, she'd actually be, you know, maybe not questionable, just not great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she's doing her best.
She's doing her best. Single mom in it.
Working reporter who
Yeah.
never files a story. Constantly on the verge of getting fired.
And the last thing you'll find in this movie includes sadness.
Yes. Lots of sadness.
Lots of sadness.
Lots of sadness. Lots of green sadness.
Yes. Bluish, greenish,
Mhm.
David Fincher sadness.
They discovered the green button
yes.
on the color timing computer program, and they hit it every scene.
Yeah.
So, The Ring. This, as I said, I completely did not remember how this movie opened with the two girls
That
watching
really
TV.
surprises me because I feel like that's one of the more iconic sequences of this movie.
Well, it's weird because I think I was getting it mixed up with the thing that I watched most recently that opened like this is Scream 4. And so, which is almost identical to this because it's like a Russian doll situation of girls
Yes.
watching horror movies. And then I think they also spoofed this in Scary Movie,
Oh, I'm sure.
I think.
Yeah.
And so I didn't even put together that's where that came from.
Yeah.
And so I was really surprised for the beginning of this movie to be two girls kind of like in a very post-Scream meta kind of way
Yeah.
talking about the dangers of television and
Yes.
the urban legend of the tape and the phone.
Yeah, and the fact that we're all losing brain cells because of the radio waves from our televisions.
Right. Yeah. I did like that they were dressed sort of vaguely reminiscent of Japanese schoolgirls.
Yeah.
As sort of a bit of a nod to the original.
Yeah.
And I also didn't realize that the closet scene happened so early,
Yeah.
which I started like doing the math in my head. I was like, wait a minute. So does the closet thing happen now? Like right at the beginning, and then it didn't, and then they go to, and then it got me because I wasn't.
Yeah, because you
expecting
thought like, oh, I guess it's a later thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you identified with the opening of this film when you watched it the first time?
Absolutely, because I mean, I was almost the same age as these girls. I think in the movie they're supposed to be 16, and I was 14, and I went to a Catholic high school, so I didn't have those uniforms, but like hanging out on like a Friday night, having your best friend come over for like a sleepover directly from school, talking a bunch of precocious bullshit because you're precocious bullshit teenagers, and just giving each other like kind of like a gentle ribbing about stuff.
Yeah.
Like when she's telling the story about having watched the tape, and she mentions that she watched it when she was away the weekend before with Josh, her secret boyfriend.
Yes.
And the other girl is like, "You were with Josh? Oh my God, you hoe!" And like, kind of they start like, like play fighting. Like that was all very, very familiar to me. Like they felt like very real teenage girls.
Yeah.
In my opinion, like I always liked that opening because I buy it. Like I buy that they're teenagers. I buy that they're friends. They feel real to me in a way that makes what happens to them feel like have more of an impact.
Yeah.
I was also and kind of still continue to be a bit of a like ephemera pack rat in terms of like scraps of paper and voluminous notebooks full of like random notes and cutouts and doodles and shit. So like that's a big plot point throughout the movie of Katie's like book.
Right. Yeah.
Where they keep finding like things she clippings she made or like drawings she did, and I'm like that also strikes me as very like, oh yep, I had a bunch of those.
Yeah, I think the one thing that I really forgot about this, and I don't know if this is a result of this thing becoming so big and becoming such a pop culture touchstone, I completely forgot about the urban legend nature of the whole thing. Like, I didn't remember where they got did I remember? I kind of remember where they got the tape from, but not really. But when she starts going through the story of, have you heard about first of all, how did the friend hear about this thing?
I mean, well, if there were 4 people who watched the tape, like, first of all, how did the tape get there? So were there people before them?
Right. Well, that's an interesting question that I want to talk about later.
Okay.
But
for the sake of this portion of our discussion, there were 4 teenagers who a week before watched this tape. Of course, they've gone to school and talked to people about, oh my God.
But how did they know?
Well, because they...
Like, where is this urban... So
they watched a creepy tape.
Yeah.
And then the phone rang.
Oh, that's true.
And they picked it up, and a creepy voice said 7 days. And they're like, what is that supposed to mean? Are we going to, like, die or something? I guess we're going to die, haha. And then you start talking bullshit to your friends.
Yeah, okay, that tracks. But yeah, I had forgotten that there was this very urban legend sort of thing built into it. So when she starts, like, just laying it all out, I was like, oh, okay, yeah. It's very fun.
Yeah.
And it's I think it works better than a lot of movies that have tried to do this since then. Like, I feel like you could say, like, a descendant of this movie is something this sort of predates the creepypasta, the idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? And then movies that were created from that, like Slender Man or something.
Totally.
And I think where those movies kind of fail, this actually succeeds. And I'm not totally sure why. I think partly because they treat it fairly seriously and actually have people do interesting things in the course of 2 hours instead of just bullshit. But I really appreciated the urban legend aspect, because it's weird, right? Because you get it sort of sets up this thing as either something that could work as a sequel, like it's an urban legend, so that means it doesn't have to just be limited to this one thing. But at the same time, they also solve the mystery at the end.
Yeah.
Which is, I do want to talk about the ending, because the ending's a little bit weird to me, that they solve it and the kid's like, actually, no, that was what you weren't supposed to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's a little bit in service
we'll get there.
We'll get there. But I do like the urban legend aspect of it, and it makes it more relatable, I think, because everybody sort of has those stories and stuff.
Yeah, those stories, especially like high school aged kids passing along those stories and sort of trying to scare each other with it a little bit, but like maybe believing in it, maybe not, maybe trying to pretend like they don't, but they're scared of it anyway.
Yeah.
This also might be jumping a little far ahead, but one of the things I love about this movie, and I feel like, again, it probably has a lot to do with my age when it came out, but the mix of like technology and analog stuff, like it's easy to forget now, because it feels both so long ago and was, but in some ways was not, that like, yeah, we had like computers and cell phones and you could scan shit out of a physical book, but like you didn't scan it and then upload it into a cloud and then like read it on your phone. Right.
They were printing shit in this movie.
Right.
This is a big movie for the Epson desk jet.
Yes. Ryko copiers.
Yes.
But I kind of love that about this movie, that there is this sort of like emphasis on documentation in this very old school physical way that nowadays would not be the same.
Yes.
Because I think it drives a lot of the action of the movie, because she has to like physically go places and find stuff and then like compile it. And then, there's like a dossier by the end of this book.
Right.
By the end of this movie that's like a book sized, like clippings and all of this stuff. And I feel like that actually helps make the urban legend aspect of it work really well, because it's still a recording, like it's a tape, it's a recording, but it's not something you can just email to somebody.
Right.
It's not something that's posted on YouTube. It's not something that people are getting off of an app on their phone. It's like a physical thing that you have to be kind of unlucky enough to come across.
Yeah.
Which I find really interesting, because nowadays I find like some movies that try and do this kind of thing, it can get a little complicated where it's like, well, if this was just out on the internet, then like everyone would see it and just like millions of people would start dying.
Right.
You know, like Samara would be very busy.
Yeah. You clearly haven't seen Rings from about 6 or 7 years ago.
I have not, and I do not want to.
I'm going to talk about in a second. Yes.
But I think that because it is like an analog thing, it keeps it contained in a way that makes the story more interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah.
That there is like a literal and figurative paper trail, and it also just can't be written off with like, oh, just delete it off your phone, idiot. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like, no, this thing is out there, and there's no way to track it. One of the notes I kind of made was that nowadays, if you were a teenager, if you were 15 and you were watching this movie for the first time, the fact that somebody watched a video and then someone knew you watched that video and was able to call you would be way less creepy.
Right.
Because, you know, I don't know, but there's like ways you could explain that nowadays.
Yeah. Like, is Samara leaving a lot of voicemails now? Because people don't pick their phone. It's a blocked number.
It's not even a voicemail, it's a text.
I feel like Samara isn't up on the times enough to know that people I feel like she's still calling.
Does your voicemail not just give you voice to text? Like,
yeah, I guess it does.
Yeah. I just get a transcript of my voicemails. I don't even listen to them anymore.
Although it's not very accurate, so it would just the voice to text would just see 70s. But
how mad would Samara get if you like left her message unread? You know, if you had like read receipts on.
She's staring at her phone. It's like, oh, they read it, but they're not texting me back.
Texting me back.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things about this actually is that, you know how much I love a good magic book, and this movie comes out at a time where documenting things and media is in a very transitional period. Yeah. So the internet exists. It's starting to heat up, but it's not the beast that it is now. But we're still in the age of VHS tapes. Like, this came out on VHS. Yeah. This movie came out on VHS. DVDs haven't taken over yet. Streaming doesn't exist.
Yeah. I mean, DVDs are like out there and around at this
they
point.
Exist, but they haven't.
If your video library is split, then that would be normal.
Right. And what this actually does really well is it bounces kind of back and forth and gives you a little bit of everything. Yeah. So it has her looking stuff up on the internet, but that usually serves to drive her backwards in time more towards the more analog stuff.
Right. Where she then has to go to like the town archives or whatever and like dig back through these giant leather books.
She's using everything. She's using like giant old newspapers. I think she's using like microfilm at some point. She's using VHS tape. She's using the internet. She's using everything.
She's got a digital camera.
Yep, digital camera.
She's got a cell phone.
Yep.
So does Noah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, I've always felt that, and I don't know if I feel like I've probably talked about this before, but when it comes to this sort of stuff, I always say that analog is a better storytelling device than digital, like almost always. Because there is something more tangible about it. Yeah. And it isn't as ephemeral and like you're saying about it's not just a YouTube video. Right. That it kind of breaks your story a bit because it's like, wait a minute, this has like 14 million views.
Yeah. Or it's just not as interesting to watch a character sit in front of their computer and like, because the way we do research for things now is we just sit in front of our computers. Right. Like, you don't even need to take your laptop to the library anymore. All these things are accessible online. Yeah. It's a lot more interesting for her to do a little bit of digging on her computer, realize that these records are kept at the Historical Society of Moesco Island, and then she needs to actually go out to the island to get her hands on them.
Right. The modern version is she goes to the Moesco Island Library website. Yes. Types in what she's looking for. Yes. It doesn't come up, and she's like, this interface is terrible. I don't know why they haven't updated this.
It's like they're still using the Dewey Decimal System. Yes.
But yeah, like in I haven't seen Rings, but I was doing a little bit of searching into the sequels and stuff. And of course, Rings came out like 6 years ago, I think.
Jesus.
Yeah. And so you've got someone clicking an MOV file that opens up the
God.
video, and then there's a certain point in the trailer where every TV screen on the backs of seats on an airplane switch onto the video, which is kind of great, but also really stupid.
Yeah.
But it's like turning this digital takes away
Yeah.
so much of the impactfulness of it, because that it doesn't become something that's interesting to be searched for.
Right. And the way it's spread is like too easy.
Yeah.
Like, and it can be, I don't know. I find that a lot less interesting, that it could just be like some malicious asshole sends a bunch of people a link.
Yeah. It also, I find it dates stuff horribly.
Yeah.
Like, even if you're trying to do like the most up-to-date technological thing, for a story like this, you're going to come back and watch this not even 5 years later and go, ugh.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But what they've done here is they straddle things really well, where you've got these now archaic media forms,
Yeah.
but it still works because it is tangible. It is something that these people can hold and manipulate.
Right.
And for whatever reason, when it comes to stuff like magic books and like curses and shit, it's better to do that than to get into a YouTube hole and end up on like an Angel Fire website from 1993.
Well, not to say that those aren't fun too.
No, I mean, it's like, if it's got the, I want to see Samara's website where it's like, it's got the video, but you can't click on it because the Flash plugin needs to be updated.
Yep.
And it has one of those little GIFs of the construction guy.
Yep.
That's been there for 14 years.
Lime green text on a black starry background.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, so in this movie, we start off with the teenage girls. It ends, that scene ends in Katie, who's Amber Tamblyn, getting killed by we don't know what.
Yep. I will say, the moment that people get ringed, kind of a letdown. Like, it's because they build it up so well, and then it's like, and then it's just kind of over. You know, I was.
You mean when they get rang?
Yeah.
But I mean, how do you it's kind of tough. It's a PG-13 movie. You can't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want her head to explode or something. But I don't know. There was just something about the effect where I was like, I don't know. I guess I was hoping for something a bit more.
Yeah.
More of a payoff.
Yeah, that's fair. But so then we switch our narrative from these girls to Rachel and her son Aiden. So Rachel's sister was Katie's mom.
Yes.
So she was Katie's aunt.
You know this because she is also blonde.
She's also blonde.
Yes.
Identical blonde ladies. And one thing I really...
Naomi Watts in this movie might be one of the most attractive women I've ever seen in my life.
So beautiful. I mean, she's so beautiful in general, but yeah, in this movie she looks, for some reason, I'm like, I don't know.
Back to back. This and Mulholland Drive for her.
Yeah. Wow.
Good year.
Yeah.
2 years.
But so I like the choice of Rachel as a protagonist, as a focal character, because she has a natural attachment to this story. Like her niece dies, and she kind of finds out that there's this weird mystery behind it, because not only has her niece mysteriously died, the 3 kids she was spending her weekend with the week before are also all dead. And she's an investigative journalist.
Yes.
So it makes, I like that it makes sense. It doesn't feel like, we've talked in some of the Giallo movies we've done where it feels kind of weird sometimes.
Yeah, she's not a piano player.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, why are the cops just letting you run around in all of this? And why are you putting yourself into this situation, and how would you even know where to start?
Do you know what I love about this movie? You know what is not in this movie? A single
cop
frame.
Plot.
No cops in this movie.
No cop plot.
I don't know what they're doing.
There are maybe cops when they get her out of the well.
Sure. Yes. Okay. At the end,
Yes.
the cops show up after everything's said and done.
Right. But it's very much a scene of this segment is over.
Yes.
Like we have found a resolution.
There's no moment where she goes to the cops and is like, "What are you doing to find out what happened to my niece?" And they're like, "Stop it, lady. We're the cops. We handle this stuff." Like,
go home, lady. Aren't you a mother?
Yeah, I don't know if they're even looking into this death or these other deaths. Probably not. I mean, Seattle's a pretty dangerous. It looks like it takes place in the same city as Seven.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah, it does. Wow, the fact that those might be in the same universe is blowing my mind right now.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think they are, because there's the early in the movie when they have the cousin's wake, or the post funeral party at her mom's house,
where Adam Brody shows up for a couple seconds. The OC's Adam Brody.
Oh my god. Very, very late 90s, early 2000s reference right there.
Oh yeah.
She's in the kitchen talking. Rachel's in the kitchen talking to her sister, and her sister is kind of like angrily / brokenheartedly washing dishes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of a quiet conversation, and I feel like in the background Rachel's maybe kind of looking at stuff, or like, you know what I mean? It's sort of almost hard to pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
But the sister is saying things like, you know, they're telling us like that it might have been drugs, but she didn't do drugs. They didn't find any drugs. But a 16-year-old's heart doesn't just stop. And they keep telling me that it must have just been some freak thing. But like that's when she has the moment where she says to Rachel, "But I saw her face."
I have this great image of like Chief Wiggum being the person running this investigation, and the mother being like, "But what about her face?" And him being like, "Yeah, that happens. They do that."
Yeah. It's post-death sad face.
Yeah.
But I kind of like,
once you die, the face falls off real quick.
Yeah.
Little known fact about dying.
But I feel like this is just like a small, I'm like zeroing in on this one little example of like a bigger trend in this movie that I actually really appreciate. Because like we've said in other movies where they try to go too hard into the exposition and they try to like lay it all out in front of you, and it's just like cumbersome dialogue. This movie does a little bit of that with the videotape itself, and a lot of that with like Samara and her family. But when it comes to the characters we're watching who are currently alive, it's all these kind of like little moments and conversations.
Yeah.
Like you're not like, there's no big conversation where the sister says to Rachel, "Well, I just don't understand why Noah isn't here. I mean, I know you guys split up like 4 years ago, and I know he doesn't see Aiden, his son, very often.
Right. Yeah.
But he really should be here to support him. Doesn't he know how much Katie and him meant to one another?" Like, you don't get a lot of that. You don't get a lot of like, "Well, it sounds like you've been struggling at the newspaper to find a story," or
that one scene at the newspaper is kind of weird.
It is kind of weird, but like,
it's like they cut it out of a Superman comic or something, where Perry White comes out and goes, "Lois, I need another. You're fired unless you get me a new thing." She's like, "I'm on it, Chief. I got a real good story." He's like, "Well, all right,
fine." But I kind of like that about this movie, that it doesn't take a ton of time to sort of say like, you know, this is Rachel. Rachel once had a fling with Noah, and that's how Aiden was born. And now Rachel throws herself into her work because she doesn't think she's a good mom. And like, it sort of just lets those things coast until they become a little more important to the story.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
And that's what I think when I watched this the first time, I didn't really pick up on that.
Yeah.
Because I remember being kind of confused by the funeral scene.
Yeah.
And this time I was also kind of a little confused because I forgot about all this stuff. And so like the way that they lay it out is she goes to pick up, so Amber Tamblyn dies.
Yes.
What's her name?
Katie.
Katie dies. And then we switch over to Rachel, who goes to pick up her son.
Yes.
And the teacher's like, "Oh, he's been doing these weird drawings." And then she's like, "Oh, his best friend just died." And I'm thinking, I was like, "A 10-year-old died?" I wasn't connecting because there's no reason to connect that at that point. And then they go to the funeral,
right,
where there are pictures of Katie and Aiden.
Right.
You're like, "Oh, this is the best friend. Was she
Yeah.
a babysitter?
They do kind of, when she talks to the teacher, they kind of get into it, but they don't make a big point of it.
Yeah.
Which is one thing that I feel like is surprising about this movie, is that some of the like side conversations feel very natural. Like language wise, like they don't like hit certain information harder to draw the attention of the audience.
Yeah.
They just sort of like are two people talking about stuff. Like when she's talking to the teacher, you know, the teacher's like, I'm concerned about these drawings. And she's looking at the drawings and she says, oh yeah, that's definitely Katie. And then the teacher's like, has he talked to you about Katie dying? And the mom's like, well, not really, but obviously they were close. They spent 4 nights a week together. So all that kind of comes out in the conversation, but there's like, they don't make a big deal out of it, and your eyes are so focused on the drawings.
Yeah.
And then they move off of it really fast.
Yeah.
Like then she's taking Aiden and they're in the car and then they're getting ready for a funeral.
And then when they have the funeral,
Yeah.
I think there's storytelling through blonde ladies.
Yes.
Where they don't ever like explicitly say that these are sisters.
Right.
Don't think.
Right. They have said at this point Katie was Aiden's cousin.
Yeah.
Which implies that they are sisters.
Right.
And they look like
Their
the
hair
same person.
also implies.
Yes.
But yeah, you kind of actually have to do a little bit of work.
Yeah.
Like mental work.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting because I think most times these movies don't make you do work at the beginning.
Right.
They're just trying to lay this shit down as quickly as possible to
Yes.
get to the good stuff. But
Yep.
like they're almost kind of priming you to focus in on details,
Right.
to get you ready for whatever
Yes.
is coming next once they hit you with the video
Right.
and the story that comes after it, the investigation that she goes through.
Yes.
And it's kind of impressive actually.
I think so. I think it's kind of underrated. I think people tend to brush it off as saying like, well, this movie doesn't make much sense, or
Yeah.
this movie, you know, who is that? Who are these people? And it's like, well, if you kind of notice the little things, you can connect these dots. I think people just don't expect to encounter that in this kind of horror movie.
Yeah, for instance, the scene where she brings the tape to Noah's gigantic
Yes.
loft apartment.
Ridiculous industrial chic loft.
Yeah, that would cost like $5,000 a month to rent now,
Oh my
if
God.
not more.
I was going to say probably
Yeah.
more, depending on where it was located.
Yeah. Well, it's I guess it's Seattle, but
Yeah.
there's a fun fact about this when they start talking about the kids and where they went to school. They reference one of the kids who died as being from Back Bay.
Yeah, and he went to Revere.
Went to Revere High School.
Yeah.
And so we were watching this. We're both from Boston, going but this is supposed to be Seattle, I think. Does Seattle also have a Revere
Back
suburb or
Bay?
something? And apparently, originally, it was written to be in Boston, but they decided that Seattle, the gloominess of Seattle, fitted better.
Worked better.
So they moved it to there and just didn't change it, because who gives a shit? And I would agree.
Yep.
Where was I going? Oh, yeah. The scene where she takes the tape to Noah's loft.
Yes.
And then the other girl shows up who they never explicitly say if she's a girlfriend or if she's an assistant or if she's an assistant and they're kind of having an affair or something.
Yep.
But there's enough in the air to make it awkward for Rachel.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
You
because
know.
when Noah introduces her, she's like, oh, yeah, this is so-and-so. She's a student at whatever school. She's assisting me on some projects. And the woman says, like, oh, I prefer to think of us as partners. Haha.
Right.
And then she kisses him on the cheek.
Mm.
But at no point do Noah and Rachel, like at that point, when you've seen Noah and Rachel together enough, you kind of get that there's some sort of awkwardness there. There's some sort of tension.
And the way that she blows up at him at the elevator.
Yes.
As we were watching it, I was like, that seemed a little bit harsh.
Right.
What did he do?
Yeah.
And it's clearly because of,
Yes.
they have that moment together, which is this kind of playful flirting moment, but is not based or built on any established stuff that you know of at this point.
Right.
But then she reacts in a way that, oh, clearly there's some sort of history here.
Yep.
And yeah, it makes you work for it a little bit.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting because, like, I think This movie has its very big, obvious themes, and then it has some like smaller, less noticeable themes. And one of them, I think, is like reluctant and or absentee fathers.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
You know, because Mr. Morgan, Brian Cox, doesn't really seem like he ever wanted a child, but his wife really did.
Yeah.
And then the whole Samara thing.
Yep.
And Rachel and Noah and Aiden are kind of a mirror image of that family. Except whereas the Morgans, Mrs. Morgan wanted a child and couldn't have one. Rachel maybe didn't necessarily want one, but she did have one.
Right.
And she stuck by her kid. And in both cases that the father is sort of like, I don't really want anything to do with this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not ready for this. I'm not into this. I'm stepping back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always a good excuse, isn't it? When you're like, yeah, my dad was a jerk. So,
yeah. So I'm going to be a jerk.
I don't want you to have a jerk for a dad. It's like, oh, great. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah. I don't want to be like my old man. Well, you're halfway. You're technically you're worse.
Yes.
I guess.
Yes. But yeah, so I think this movie is interesting in the sense of like all these little interpersonal things are out there for you to tease apart.
Yeah.
And then they are made more explicit in moments where it makes sense for them to be made more explicit. Like when Aiden gets his hands on the tape and watches it, and Rachel comes out in the middle of the night and realizes he's watched it, and she calls Noah, and Noah calls her, and he's like, I believe you that this tape is evil and it's trying to kill you and me. And when she tells Noah he watched the tape, and Noah's like, wait, who? She says, our son. And that's the first moment. You're like more than a third into the movie, probably about halfway. And that's the first moment she's kind of acknowledged that like Noah's the dad.
Yeah.
But it makes sense in that moment because she's really upset and she wants him to feel the gravity of it too. So rather than just saying Aiden, she says our son.
Yeah.
So I like those little things about this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also, I think the actual investigative, is that the word?
Yep.
Element of it. It kind of actually reminded me a bit of something like Deep Red.
Yeah.
Where they really kind of get into the cleverness of how they get these clues and where they come from. And it's not just all books.
Right.
You know, there's some elements where it's tearing wallpaper off a wall or finding a secret room under the floorboards, which I love. And it was triggering off some giallo kind of buzzers in my brain. Yeah. But it also, I didn't realize how kind of similar to like Drag Me to Hell this is. Yeah. Where it's sort of a more I don't know. I guess technically a more upbeat version when you get down to it, because Drag Me to Hell like has this sheen of she's trying to be positive, but everything goes south, and this one kind of like is the opposite. But it's funny because visually and like tonally, this one feels a little more serious and a little less. Oh yeah, Drag Me to Hell is basically torturing Alison Lohman for an hour and 30 minutes, where this one is involved more. Drag Me to Hell, she kind of like half-heartedly attempts to find out what's going on. This one is much more about that, and usually I don't like that when your plot boils down to then she has to figure out what's happening. Yeah. But I think putting the kid in there really amps up the stakes. Yep. And again, the way that they send her down the path is legitimately pretty interesting. Yeah. So much so that, well, it's very interesting. And okay, so I wanted to talk about the tone a bit because it leans on the scary stuff in the beginning. Yes. Leans on the scary stuff in the end. Yes. The middle is it's not really scary, but it's very tense and it's very creepy. Yeah, there's a lot of mood and sort of mystery. And yeah, it's definitely much more of a mood piece in the middle. Foggy Pacific Northwest ocean scenes. And And I think that the mileage could vary for that, because if you're not into it, I think that running down the clues thing could trend kind of boring. Yeah. But I think they do a pretty good job of keeping it interesting. I don't know what you think.
I think they do, and I think the way that they do that is maybe a little bit of a gimmick, but given the whole gimmick of this movie, it kind of works. Because you have had, we watch the movie with Rachel all the way through, it seems like.
Yeah.
Like the Samara's movie on the VHS tape. And then for the rest of the movie we are watching with Rachel in it, we are seeing the echoes of the things in that tape.
Right.
So as she's doing this sort of scavenger hunt for information on the tape and where it came from and who's in it and what the hell's going on with it and how to stop it, she's doing that sort of scavenger hunt while we're doing another sort of scavenger hunt of looking for the references to the things inside the tape.
Right.
As she's going forward.
Right.
And I think that adds, again, it's a little bit of a gimmick, but I think it adds interest for the viewer where you're sort of like, wait a minute, there's a ladder leaning up against the building. And that's like the ladder in the film and like the fly, the whole thing with the fly. Because do you notice there's a couple scenes where like, I know one where either she or Noah is going into an archive and a fly lands on the door and it flies in the same pattern that it flies on the screen in the movie.
Oh, I didn't notice that part.
Yeah, but there's all these little things like that happening sort of as she's progressing. Like once she finds the kind of stretched out frame and she finds the lighthouse and like, it's like it's repeating all these scenes from the creepy tape.
Yeah.
Which I think can keep you... It keeps you engaged as a viewer who's more in it for the scares. Yeah. Because it shows you that she's building towards this climax at the end.
Yeah, I think the tone element, the sort of creeping dread that they have in the middle is fairly important that they pull it off effectively.
Yeah.
Because as we were saying, as we were watching it, I kind of lose track of the plot of this right around the horse stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not totally sure. Like the imagery is unnerving enough that every time that they show Samara's mother dressed like she's in the 1800s, even though it's like 1975.
Yeah.
it's unnerving enough that you see her and you kind of go, ugh.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that I don't know about her prize horses and they started to die.
Yep.
And then I'm not even totally sure, honestly, where Samara comes into the... I think I kind of zoned out in a couple parts, but...
The implication, and here is... We're getting to one of my central gripes about this movie as much as I love it. This movie goes to painstaking lengths to explain or tie up these little visual references from the movie.
Like everything in the tape.
Everything in the tape.
Yeah.
Why Samara's doing this, why 7 days. Like all of it kind of ties up with this neat little bow. But those things are also like minor. In terms of the grand scheme of things. Whereas
minor like My Bloody Valentine minor?
No, mine are like small.
Oh.
Yeah.
Gotcha. So like a short minor.
A young minor.
Ah.
Yes.
Young adult, which would be a minor.
Yes.
Yes.
Small. But like there are big things in this movie that are sort of left as just like hand waved away.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like there's a couple things where it's like so Samara was adopted by the Morgans, who lived out on this island and bred and showed prized horses, right? They don't know where Samara came from. Like there's no talk about like her biological family, her origins, whatever. Just that, they found this girl somehow, they adopted her. Once Samara is on the island with them, things start to go wrong. That's the implication, is that something about Samara, she is able to send images into the minds of others. She starts doing it to the horses.
Okay.
Because her dad hates her and makes her sleep in the barn. The horses keep her up at night. So she starts driving the horses crazy, so they will go run and jump off a cliff.
Okay.
To shut them up. And also because she likes to hurt things,
Sure.
which is said in the video they have of her being treated at the asylum. The further implication then becomes that she starts doing this to her parents as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why her and her mother get sent to the asylum.
Okay.
So that's all sort of in there. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like when Brian Cox, Mr. Morgan, is about to kill himself in the bathtub, he's talking to Rachel and he's kind of muttering to himself a lot. And he's saying things like, she'll never be able to whisper in my ear ever again. You know, you the things she'll show you, you wouldn't believe.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's saying a lot of stuff like that. And then when you see the videotape of Samara in the asylum, they're holding up these pictures that almost look like they're on like X-ray film.
Right.
And they're saying, how did you make these? They're
Right.
asking her that. And she's saying, I didn't make them. I just think about them and then they appear.
Mm-hmm.
So there's like this, so there's this little girl who has these like psychic abilities. And it's never explored. It's
Right.
never explained. Did she really? Or did the adults around her sort of read into her behavior or some other stuff that was happening? Like, was this her adopted mom going through some sort of psychosis?
Mm-hmm.
And just like, it just so happened that the horses got sick at the same time. And then there's also this, like, jumping a little bit ahead, like, it's never explained, like, does Aiden have some sort of psychic ability? It's like heavily implied in the movie that he does.
Yeah. He's definitely got some sort of connection with Samara.
Right. She seems to show him things more than she shows other people.
Yeah.
So I don't know. And he seems to see Samara before he sees the video.
Right, because he draws the picture with the hair over the face, I think, before he sees the video.
I don't remember that, but I remember when he's at the house for the funeral,
Mm-hmm.
he sort of stares at the stairway, and they really quickly splice in. They re-show from the earlier scene with Katie and the friend, Katie's feet running up the stairs.
Mm.
And then he follows her back up the stairs. Like, he follows like the image of her up the stairs and into her room.
Right.
And when he's in her room, the same thing Katie had seen when she was looking at the TV before she died, that sort of like weird wobble in the air.
Right.
He sees it like go past him.
Right, yeah.
So like, I don't know though. Like that's all implied in there, but I don't know if I'm reading more into stuff they did just to be creepy.
Yeah. Well, that kind of leads into another thing that I want to talk about, which is the tape itself.
Yes.
Because one of my questions coming out of this
Mm-hmm.
time is, where did the tape come from? Not that it matters. Doesn't
Right.
matter. It's like who made the Necronomicon? Doesn't matter. But it's
Right.
it's an interesting question. And I was reading up on some stuff, trying to parse my way through the middle of the movie where I kind of lost track of it.
Mm-hmm.
And everything that I saw said that she makes the tape
Right.
with her mind, I guess.
Yes.
But I wasn't sure if that meant she just fully tulpas this tape into existence, or if she's doing her X-ray thing onto some videotape somewhere.
I think that's the implication.
Yeah.
Is that because it's film, it's a medium she can use, because she does it in the room above the well where she is trapped.
Right.
Right? That's where the tape really comes from. It's
Yeah.
cabin 12
I
at
think-
at the campground.
I think the thing is, I think what it comes down to ultimately is she clearly does this
Right.
after she's dead.
Yes.
So
Yes.
whatever mutant powers she has
Right.
are amplified by the fact that she's now a spirit with
Yes.
that is not at rest.
Right.
And so it doesn't really matter when or where she does it. Maybe
True.
it was just that blank tape that's been there in the thing at the cabin place was just, maybe it used to be Bambi. I don't know. And she
Right.
just, there was a tape there and she's like, that one. And then she
Yeah.
like overwrites it.
Right. Or it's a blank tape because they said they were trying to record a football game while they were there.
Yeah,
Maybe they
there you
brought
go.
the blank tape with them. And
Yeah.
she was just like, no football game for you.
Yeah.
Only death.
That's interesting too. I mean, how long has the tape been there? Is this the first time this has happened? These events?
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think it's entirely possible.
Does that guy who works there, does he realize some people just don't come back because they die after 7 days?
Seems like some people just don't come back from there in general since they run away without paying.
That's true. So that implies people have watched the tape, right? Because I feel like he's...
I don't
or is it just something about that cabin, obviously, because she's buried
I think
under
it could just be the argument that it's sort of this little cabin campground in the middle of nowhere and like teens come out to fuck around.
Yeah.
And then rather than paying for it, they just leave in the middle of the night.
You
know what I mean?
I assumed it was like haunted house type stuff where they stay, but it's haunted, so then they run away.
Maybe. I didn't get that vibe, but I don't think that's impossible.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's a very valid interpretation.
Yeah.
Personally, I still think the tape itself works. Like
me too.
as a pretty creepy, frightening artifact.
Yeah. Oh, I think so too.
Like,
I mean,
I think if you show this to a 12-year-old nowadays, they're still going to be kind of like, "What the fuck is that?"
That's interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because does this work still with a younger generation that has never interacted with a VHS tape? Because I feel like everything is comprehensible enough that I can't see why it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Because these things do exist. But obviously it probably doesn't have the same impact as it did when VHS tapes were still out there. Because I guess one of the things is when they put this movie on VHS, when you played the video from the very beginning, the first thing on the tape that played was the actual Ring Samara video. And then it had a phone ringing sound. And then it would go into trailers and then the movie.
Cool.
So clearly they're taking advantage of the medium being about the medium.
Right.
But yeah, I wonder. I try to think back to something like Evil Dead, where in 1981, finding a reel-to-reel tape player in a basement is not really that that's a form of media that probably still was relatively prevalent, or like it wasn't like Ash doesn't pick it up and go, what's this? You know?
Right. It's not like he found a phonograph.
Right.
Right.
But having not watched Evil Dead till the mid 90s, if not later, depending on when I watched it, I didn't not understand what was going on.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have any personal experience with a reel-to-reel tape machine, you know?
Right. I think at this point it might actually now, because it's been more than 20 years. I think it might be an old enough form of media that there's something inherently creepy about how old it is and how out of date it is.
I think so too.
You know what I mean? Like maybe 10 years ago, it would have just been like, VHS tapes, those are dumb. Nobody has those anymore. But
Titanic.
Yeah. But now we're far enough away from it that it's kind of come back around to being both romanticized and also creepy.
Yeah.
The same way like vinyl records, you know, like nowadays everybody collects records again, but 10, 15 years ago, some people did, but most people didn't.
Yeah.
And a record being played in a movie would be sort of eerie, you know, because of its age and because of the fact that then, this thing has just been sitting waiting for you for 15, 20, 25 years.
Yeah. I still think the tape itself, the actual set of images, is still very good. Like, it's very creepy. Yeah.
I do too.
It's very effective.
That's what I was kind of saying earlier.
Yeah.
Is like, I still think it works as like an unsettling series of images.
Yeah.
That if you were going through your parents' basement, you were helping them clean out their basement, and you found a VHS tape and found an old VCR and put it in and saw that. Yeah. I think it would still be like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it's always interesting to me when, I feel like we've talked about this before. I can't remember what we were talking about, but watching a movie is an inherently a voyeuristic activity, right? And so that's why when you break the fourth wall, it either can kind of take you out of it or it can add to a joke or something.
Yeah.
But when you break the fourth wall in a movie and it's scary, for some reason it's so much more unnerving because it's like the thing that you're watching has caught you.
Yeah.
And I found in this tape when she's brushing her hair and her eyes kind of click over right into the barrel of the camera, it's very, you kind of get shivers a little bit because it's very effective.
It is. And she has that actress who plays Mrs. Morgan has like one of those faces where she's not what you might necessarily call a traditionally beautiful woman, but she's still a very striking woman, you know, and she's got like this old timey kind of look about her.
Sure.
And so when she sort of trains her eyes on you through the mirror or over her shoulder, it feels very intense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like somebody looking back through time at you. And
that can be so much more effective than going over the top with a scare. Like I still,
like her face doesn't melt off and she starts screaming.
Right.
She just looks at you.
I still think, even though some of our listeners claim that this doesn't actually exist, but I've tried to point it out that it does. The final shot in The Innkeepers, when you see that very faint ghost who then just turns over and looks down the camera, is very scary, I find.
Yeah.
And there's something about it that just, when it's done right, is so much more unnerving than a lot of special effects or anything like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So how do you feel? You mentioned this a little bit earlier. How do you feel about the sort of false ending, the turn in the sort of fourth, fifth act?
I'm of two minds about it. Because on the one hand, it feels like we're in a horror movie. We got to send him out. We finished our story, but we got to give him another scare at the end. Otherwise, it's kind of going out on a bit of a low note.
Yeah.
And it feels a little bit like maybe it was put in there for that reason. But on the other hand, it's so good.
Yeah. And
I think I've said this before, but there's a screenwriting podcast that I listen to sometimes. And where the guy who does the show talks about how when you're writing a screenplay or a story or a concept, anything that can happen should happen. So if you're the example he was using was 10 Cloverfield Lane, where that whole movie is about Mary Elizabeth Winstead being worried that there are aliens and that the world has exploded or whatever, and then eventually she gets out and she thinks, oh no, everything is fine. But then they hit you, no, the aliens actually did come, right? And this is one of those things where they tease you with the video for so long. If you got out of this movie and you didn't see what happens, I think it would be extremely disappointing.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. And I like, you brought up Drag Me to Hell earlier, and I like that this movie sort of does a similar thing to what Drag Me to Hell does, which is it resists the happy ending.
Yeah, it does kind of like have its cake and eat it too a little bit. It
splits the difference a little bit.
This is like if Drag Me to Hell ended with Justin Long being dragged to hell.
Sure.
Because the main character gets out of the situation.
Sure.
But they also pay off the concept,
Yeah, I understand that. I think the difference for me is that in Drag Me to Hell, the main character really only wants to save herself.
Sure. Yeah.
Whereas in The Ring, Rachel is much more interested in saving Aiden.
Yeah.
And she can't do that if she's dead. So
True.
Part of her motivation for staying alive and figuring it out, a big chunk of it, is to save her son. But yeah, I do still think that the ending is bittersweet at best.
Right.
Like Noah dies and Rachel and Aiden live, but the way in which they live seems to be that they have to make a copy of the tape and show it to somebody.
Yeah, that's the one that I wasn't sure about. Is it something you actually have to pay forward, or is it just a matter of you make a copy, put it back on the shelf, and then,
The implication seems to be that you have to keep it going.
Yeah.
Because I think Aiden even says, what about the person we show it to?
Right.
And there's really like no answer to it.
Yeah. Do you think that they show it to the girlfriend? Because that was my takeaway, was that she was going to show it to the girlfriend.
That would be really cruel, because the girlfriend, Noah's girlfriend / assistant / partner / whatever, she didn't really do anything wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And when all right, backing up 2 steps. Rachel and Noah they end up back at the campground at the cabin. They, through a series of goofy flailings, find a well under the cabin.
Great sequence. That whole sequence is really good.
I really like it. I really love that part.
Turns into Final Destination a bit with like the nails coming up.
Yeah,
and,
the
but
TV sliding
works.
down to knock the TV of all things, of course.
Yes.
Being the thing to knock Rachel into the well. And while she's down there, she sort of has the vision of Samara's death, and by death I mean murder, and how her mother thought she killed her and then dumped her body in a well, but it turns out that she knocked her out and then dumped her body in a well, and then she died.
Yes.
So that she's trapped alive in the well for some period of time. And the implication is that because Rachel has found Samara's remains and is going to give her a proper burial, that she has done the right thing. The twist we get from Aiden the next day is you weren't supposed to help her.
Right.
And then we get the scramble of, oh no, this means it's Noah's final day. And he gets, as you put it, ringed.
Yes.
And Rachel goes up to find him to try and see if he's okay. She finds him dead. And she's very traumatized, to be fair. But then she's leaving the apartment. She sees the girlfriend coming in and she doesn't warn her.
Right.
She just sort of lets her go find her boyfriend horribly mutilated in death.
Right.
It's kind of
rough choice.
Yeah, it's kind of fucking cruel, you know?
I mean, I have to assume she does that because the girlfriend might assume that she killed him.
Maybe and she's just super focused on I have to get home to my son.
Yeah.
I don't know how to stop this now. Why aren't I dead? Why is Noah dead? How do I prevent Aiden from being dead?
Yeah. So I guess my other issue, if you want to call it an issue, because ultimately I don't really think it matters, but does it not sort of invalidate the entire rest of the story if Naomi Watts figures out what's going on, puts Samara to rest, and then Samara's like, psych, I'm just going to keep killing people. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if invalidates is the right word.
Yeah.
You know, it's because Naomi Watts just follows her own view of what she thinks is happening.
Sure.
I mean, for most of the movie, she thinks it's Anna Morgan. It's the mom who's sending this message through the tape. She doesn't even know Samara exists until right before she gets on the boat.
Right.
Yeah, for most of it, she thinks it's the mom, and then she sort of realizes that Samara exists.
Yep.
So I don't know if invalidating is quite the right word. It's more sort of Rachel made a series of incorrect assumptions.
Yeah, I guess so.
And a lot of the stuff in in the recordings of Samara is she even says when the psychiatrist or the doctors or whatever are well, you don't want to hurt anybody, and she's like, but I do.
Yeah.
I do want to hurt them, and I'm not gonna stop.
Yeah.
So it's sort of she kind
it's-
of does tell you that I'm just a psychotic little psychic girl.
Yeah, I guess it's
who wants revenge.
I guess the disconnect for me is, and I'm not saying that this makes it wrong or anything, but traditionally, this type of ghost story wraps up once you finish the business of the spirit. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, yeah. And finishing the business would be sort of setting the record straight on her death.
Right.
Yeah.
And if what they're going for is sort of a fake out there, I don't know if it totally plays.
Yeah. I think what they are going for is a bit of a fake out, don't you?
Yeah, they must be. They must be, because it's the only way that stuff really tracks for me. Is if the idea is that they are, you along with Rachel are assuming that this is going to stop things.
Right, you're
and
sort of lulled
nope,
into a sense of security.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like you said, then it would be disappointing to end the movie there
Right.
and not see
Yeah.
the payoff of you've watched this movie and now.
Have you seen The Changeling with George C. Scott? Haunted house movie?
No, I have not.
Okay. We're going to come back and talk about this after we do that movie.
Okay.
for reasons you'll understand when you watch it.
Alrighty then.
But yeah, I think the ending, that final scene, I very specifically remember watching that final scene, and when she comes out of the TV, her coming out of the TV was scary enough, but when she does the jump forward, that shit was scary as hell.
I remember that really getting to me and everyone else in the movie theater.
Yeah.
She still looks surprisingly good.
Yeah.
Like for
those
2002
effects look really good.
effects, like of her coming out of the TV and sort of having the like staticky, flickery vibe about her, I still think it looks pretty decent.
I wish they had done something different with her face.
Yeah.
Because when her hair parts, she just sort of looks like a Muppet that someone left in
like
the
an
water
old
too
crone.
long. Yeah, it wasn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it looked like a kid with gross makeup on.
Yeah.
I wish they'd pushed it further and made her like, I don't know, a skull or something. I don't know.
Yeah, more like the faces of the people she leaves behind.
Yeah, something
You know?
like that. Something a little bit scarier than just sort of like a, huh.
Yeah. Big angry eyebrows.
Yes. But yeah, I think overall, do you think this movie still works?
I do.
Yeah.
I think, it's difficult to divorce it from its cultural impact.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it really did kick off sort of like a whole subgenre of these like, East Asian adaptation movies or importing them straight in, because it was like, this was the moment people realized that like, oh, Japanese movies have some Japanese have some great horror movies. And that I think led to people realizing that like Korea has some great horror movies. And wait, does that maybe mean other cultures beyond them even have some great horror movies?
Let's not get crazy.
Yeah. Sure. But I do think it's sort of, like the little girl in a wet or dirty white dress with the long dark hair in front of her face is now like a cliched trope in haunted houses and spoof movies and Halloween costumes. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
And this movie is why. But I still think it works. I still think it's like an interesting and I think surprisingly well crafted movie.
Yeah, it's very well put together.
For a PG-13 2002 adaptation of a Japanese movie.
Yeah, I think this is kind of what this is the vibe you need to push for if you want a PG-13 movie to really be effective.
Yeah.
This kind of feels like The Omen. Actually, it's probably closer to The Omen than anything else.
Yeah.
Because The Omen has the same kind of tracking down of story about what happened and all this kind of stuff.
Right. It's punctuated by sort of these big scary moments, but not like, it's not this sort of relentless drive of like, like a slasher film where like the murderer kills one person at the beginning and then they kill another person and then all of a sudden they're killing everybody in sight.
Yeah. And, I have nothing against PG-13 horror movies because if you can scare people, you can scare people. Yeah. But I feel like a lot of them have a tendency to get neutered a bit, or they don't. Usually in a PG-13 tends to mean like we just took the blood out. And that's not the vibe that you need to be going for.
Sure. And I think, personally, I think one of the reasons this one still works is that you don't need blood. Yeah. Really? Like it's not, it's not the ghost that makes people's heads explode.
Right. Now that's a great title for a movie.
Especially if you say it in like Italian or something.
Yes. I actually wonder. I would not be surprised if this movie got an R rating on the first pass, because I feel like, how sometimes they can go R with something just because it feels bad. Yeah. Like there's something weird about the feeling of it.
Yeah. It makes them feel not happy.
Yeah. And that plus how quickly they show you the messed up faces makes me feel like the MPAA was like, we need you to cut 5 frames out of when they show the girl in the closet. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I could imagine that. But I think this is one of those movies where it doesn't need to be rated R to be
no, not at all.
Scary.
No.
Like I don't think it would gain anything
yeah.
by being pushed up to that.
I don't think so either.
Yeah.
So this was the one thing I was going to mention, because this is based on the first book of a series of novels,
Mm-hmm.
Japanese novels.
Yes.
It was made into a television movie in 1995
Hmm.
before Ringu.
That's so weird to me.
Yeah.
That there was a TV movie version of this.
Well, the crazy thing is I think it's 3 books,
Hmm.
and all 3 books had been adapted before this was made in Japan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so they had already done adaptations of basically everything in Japan
Wow.
before they even did this one. And then the Japanese version of, what's her name, Sadako, I think, or something,
Yes.
is she's lived on in other films. There's actually one called that I really wanted to watch, but I heard was really bad, called The Grudge versus The Ring.
Oh, boy.
It's
Is this like
Sadako.
a Freddy versus
Kinda,
Jason
yeah.
style?
It's Sadako from The Ring versus the other long-haired ghost from The Grudge.
Yes.
But I guess I haven't watched Ringu in a long time.
Yeah, I haven't either.
But apparently the psychic power aspect is a lot more present in that story and in the book.
Interesting.
And it's funny because as we were talking about that, I was thinking it feels like the element that when they translated it to the American version, they're kind of like, we don't really know what to do with this. Let's we'll put it in there, but let's kind of
Push it into the background.
push it into the background a bit
Yeah,
and
yeah.
focus on some of the other stuff. But
Yeah.
I guess there's more psychic link stuff in the Japanese. It's been a very long time since I've seen it.
Yeah.
And I guess the protagonists are kind of flipped in Ringu, where it's the husband, I think, is the more aggressive's not the right word, but he's the driver of the story.
Sure.
The Rachel analog is still the person who's like the point of contact for the audience, but I believe it's her husband in the movie who is driving, doing much more of the proactive stuff.
Yeah. Interesting.
Music by Hans Zimmer. It's the first time he and Gore Verbinski worked together. They worked together again on Pirates of the Caribbean. It's a good soundtrack. It's a good score.
Yeah, it works really well for the movie. I think the creepy noises and stuff that they do with the video, with the tape, work really well. That sort of like you can even hear it from the other room and know that somebody's watching it. The like sounds that go with it, I think, are really well done.
Yep, and Hans employs everybody's favorite horror movie music motif, the dies irae.
Yep.
Which
Gotta have it.
If you've watched The Shining, you'll never be able to not spot that theme. But yeah, I think that's going to be it. This is number 192, I believe, on our list. How do you feel about the placement?
I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah.
You know, I think this movie is easy to remember as a lot scarier than it is.
Yeah.
But the moments that are scary are still iconic enough. And like we were saying earlier, it had a big enough cultural impact that I think it belongs on the list. You know, like kicking off the whole subgenre of Japanese and South Korean imports, and just sort of the holdover that, you know, everybody's had for so long about it. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. 192 feels right to me.
Yeah. I think I could see it. If it shifted into the 180s because a couple things moved around, I'd be like, sure.
Yeah,
but
it's a tough one, right? Because I think the cultural impact is probably bigger. Not to say that it's a bad movie, because obviously it's good.
Yeah.
But does it get more points for being this door opening?
I kind of think it does.
Yeah.
You know, like I think if we're taking this list as the 200 greatest horror movies of all time, you have to take into account the longevity of the impact it had on the people who saw it.
Yeah.
So I think this one's got a pretty good recognition even now.
Yeah. It had 2 sequels. It had Ring 2 and Rings, and I don't think anybody watched them.
Nope.
Maybe Ring 2, but I don't know.
I don't remember ever seeing it.
I barely remember Rings coming out. So
I didn't, though. I don't think I even knew it did.
Yeah. I think it sort of goes to show that updating the media to try and be modern, it just doesn't work sometimes.
Right.
You know?
Not if there's not a good storytelling reason for it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So that's going to do it. I hit the randomizer button, beep, boop, boop, beep, boop, 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 boop. and it landed on number 183, which I'm very excited about, which is Night of the Comet.
Ooh.
Which is a movie I've been wanting to watch for a very long time, but haven't, because
Yeah.
I've been assuming we're going to get to it on the list, and
Cool.
now we have.
Yay.
So next time, we will be watching Night of the Comet. Thank you guys for listening. If you'd like to support the show, head over to patreon.com/thepenskyfile, where you can follow Amanda and I as we cover video nasties this year. January was Dario Argento's Tenebrae. February was Possession.
Mm-hmm.
And March is Andy Warhol's Frankenstein, or also known as, well, more primarily known as Paul Morrissey's Flesh for Frankenstein, which I'm excited to say. So very difficult to see. You can't stream it, at least not traditionally. If you go to archive.org, there you can find it on there to watch.
Cool.
But I didn't want to do that because that sucks.
Because there's a better way.
Yes. And so I picked up the Vinegar Syndrome Blu-ray, which comes with Flesh for Frankenstein in 3D. So Amanda and I will be watching this movie in 3D. I previewed a little bit of it. I've never seen it before. We're going to see some boobs. So
three-dimensional boobs.
Yes. Which is a first. Also, you know what's really cool about
You
it?
just said you've never seen...
Not in 3 dimensions. No, never.
What else is really cool about it?
2 and 4, yes, but not 3.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
It comes with 2 versions of 3D. So it comes with the television style of 3D, as well as it comes with red and blue 3D glasses, and you can watch it that way as well. I tried to watch a bit of it. It's very difficult to do.
Yeah, that sounds both great and nauseating.
It's cool for like a few minutes, but I don't think I could watch the whole movie that way.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's what we'll be doing next month on Patreon in the month of March. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you, Clay.
And we'll see you next time with Night of the Comet.
7 days.
Technically 14 because we do this every other week. But I
All
get
right,
what you're
let's
saying.
just sign off.
I get what you're saying.
Sign off. You ruined it.
14 days. It's not
Bye.
quite.